Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Time to check out the betting lines and to get the edge with Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info on the two games that matter this week. Tons of bowl games, but we focus on the two that get everyone's attention, of course, because they are playing with purpose at both the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl. Ohio State-Clemson and the opener, LSU, taking on the Oklahoma Sooners. Steve, how you doing today?
Hey, Mark, doing well.
So LSU-Oklahoma, the metrics tell us that LSU, Clemson, and Ohio State have separated themselves. They're undefeated. Oklahoma made the playoff. They're going to be there competing for a championship like everybody else. But Vegas has the Tigers tabbed as a 13.5-point favorite and a ton of points expected in this one at 75.5.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's good for Oklahoma here is they're playing a much weaker defensive team in LSU. I mean, LSU might be considered the number one team right now, but I personally feel like Ohio State and Clemson are the two best teams in the country. I think it's a little bit of a shame that they're playing in the other semifinal. That really, I think, will be the best game of all, probably the best game we've seen all season in college football. LSU defensively gives up over 3 touchdowns a game. And you compare that to Ohio State and Clemson. Ohio State and Clemson allowing about 11 and 12 points a game each. Oklahoma more than capable of moving the ball in this game. They averaged 43 points a game against an LSU team, as I mentioned, is giving up 21. The problem for Oklahoma, of course, has been their defense the last several seasons. They give up 24.5. But you look at these defensive numbers, there's not a huge difference. I mean, Oklahoma gives up 5.3 yards per play. LSU gives up 5.0. LSU obviously has been a potent offense this year, 47.5 points a game. Oklahoma, 43 a game. And then you look at this. Oklahoma averages 8.2 yards per play. LSU averages just 7.8. Oklahoma actually averages more yards per pass than LSU. And everyone knows about, Joe Burrow and company. Oklahoma technically has a better passing offense. So I think this line is a little inflated. And then you look at my power rankings, they come out to only 10 points. This line was briefly 14 a couple weeks ago. It's 13.5 now. It'll be very interesting to see if it hits that key number of 14 again by kickoff this weekend. Either way, though, I do think this line's a little high, and I would say Oklahoma is a live dog getting 2 touchdowns. And as you know, Mark, you always say these big dogs, you want to have some backdoor cover potential as well. And Oklahoma with that offense and that passing attack, as I just referenced, has plenty of, they'd be down by 20 late in this game and lose by 13. Wouldn't surprise me.
Absolutely. So we've got some key personnel issues right there. Oklahoma losing its starting safety, second leading tackler on the team to a broken collarbone, the leader in the secondary, also hanging in the balance, a couple suspensions. Their leading sack man on the defensive front, Ronnie Perkins, and also their second leading rusher from the running back position, Ramondre Stevenson. Those suspensions have been appealed, and there's some news out there that those players will be reinstated, but that has yet to be seen. And obviously the pass rush against LSU is vital. So 13.5 LSU, 75.5 on the over-under. Looks like a 44-31 Vegas projection on that one. Steve Merrill, Pro Sports Info, setting us up for the national championship semifinal games. Clemson, Ohio State, that's the marquee matchup in primetime. The Tigers a 2-point favorite, over-under at 63, Steve.
Yes, this is about a 32-30 projection. So obviously a lot of points, as I mentioned, considering Clemson and Ohio State both allow less than 13 points a game defensively. But once again, just like the other two teams we talked about, two great offensive teams. Ohio State averages nearly 49, Clemson 46.5 a game. Clemson actually has been better on a yards per play perspective, averaging 7.5 yards per play. Ohio State 7 yards per play. And just to put that in perspective, every time they run a play, they're about 70% towards a first down, which is pretty crazy when you think of it that way. That's how well they move it. But once again, two really good defensive teams, much better defensive teams than either Oklahoma or LSU. And that's what makes this such a great matchup. Really interesting article I saw on the Internet on 247 the other day. If you look at the best teams ever in the last 20-plus years of the BCS era, looking at the Sagergen ratings, Ohio State right now would be the 3rd highest ranked team ever, ahead of even Clemson and Alabama in 2016, those great teams. Yet they're an underdog in this game. That's how crazy this matchup is. I think Clemson is a very difficult team to put a good rating on right now because they've played such a weaker schedule compared to the other 3 teams in the playoff. They've set an NCAA record now. I believe it's 7 straight games by 35-point more margins of victory. They're blowing everyone out, but the ACC was no question really weak this season compared to the Big Ten and the SEC, even somewhat the Big 12. So I think that's a big question mark here. Is Clemson as good as they've looked? I was a little surprised to see Ohio State a 2-point dog. As I mentioned, they're the number one team by far in the Sagergan ratings. In fact, the third highest in history right now. By the way, the only two teams above them, I believe, were the 01 Miami Hurricanes and the 05 Texas Longhorns, which I thought was pretty interesting. So take it for what it's worth. My power rankings actually do favor Clemson by about 3 points in several ratings. I do have a few that favor Ohio State. So this is going to be a tight game. We'll see if it hits that key number of 3 or more. I doubt it will. As you mentioned, it's sitting on 2 right now. So basically, you pick the straight-up winner here, you'll most likely get the point spread winner as well.
As you allude to, Steve, if you run the advanced metrics, not just the straight yardage totals and points per game, but even those are impressive and over the top. But if you run the yards per play, the offensive efficiency, the defensive efficiency, yards per play against defensively, they're number 1 in the country. They're tied at only like 3.7 yards per play against. You run it across the board, they're the 2 best teams in the country. And so it is interesting to see. Ohio State has definitely faced the better defensive teams, 7 of the top 37 in the country. Clemson has only faced 3 of the top 60 defenses in the country. Statistically, Clemson has faced better offenses. I think that's an ACC bias they're playing in, because certainly some of the offenses in the Big Ten have not been dynamic, but Ohio State is they're playing the better defenses as well. So it kind of works in a circle like that. Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info. Please check out his work, prosportsinfo.com. And certainly you can check out the NFL, the NBA, and as well as college football right there. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, Steve. We'll catch you soon.
That's right. We'll talk next decade.
That's right. Next decade. Wow, it will be a while. Hopefully things go well for you in the meantime.
Thanks, Mark.